Hi there, my name's Aaron Lanterman. I'm a professor of electrical and computer engineering at Georgia Tech. Last week I took a look at the schematic of the API 312 microphone preamplifier, and people seem to like that. So let's look at some more mic preamps, I guess. Today I want to explore the architecture of the Trident A-range mic preamp. Trident is still an ongoing concern, so you can buy some A-range preamps from them. And I believe the preamps that Jeff Daking makes are based on the Trident A-range. I'm going to look at a DIY project called the Trident because it had the cleanest schematic I could find. I'm going to zoom in on the schematic a little bit. Just know that when you go down this direction, there's this bank of resistors to choose from going to ground by this gain control switch. There's also this separate deck that has a few resistors to ground on a few of the settings coming down this way, but for most of these it's actually disconnected. We'll come back to what that's all about. Just keep this in your head. Like the API 312, there's an input transformer. There's a little resistor network here at the front. There's a DC coupling capacitor here. Then we have a voltage amplifier here that's capacitively coupled to an output stage. And if you look at the output stage over here, you'll see that it's an AB style amplifier at the output, complementary push-pull pair. You'll see something like that in the API 2520 op amp used in the API 312 preamp we looked at last time. In this video, I primarily want to focus on the voltage amplifier here. This isn't an op amp. It's a Class A amplifier built out of 3 transistors. But the underlying principle of the way this works is the same as a standard op-amp non-inverting configuration. Yeah, the DC biasing is complicated, but let's assume that's been worked out, and each of these transistors have certain small signal properties that have been determined. You can learn more about this kind of stuff in my ECE 3400 Analog Electronics lecture series, but we won't need most of those details here. Basically, we want to be able to trace the signal from the input to the output, and then also trace the feedback loop for the signal. Now, when you're looking at transistor circuits, you think about bases as inputs and collectors as outputs. Emitters can be inputs or outputs, or maybe a bit of each, depending on the situation. This is for standard amplifier circuits. There may be some weird circuits out there where you have to think about these things differently. Now, you've probably heard people describe FETs as voltage-controlled current sources as a way of contrasting them with BJTs that people will call current-controlled current sources. Now, while FETs are best thought of as voltage-controlled current sources, this business about BJTs being current-controlled current sources, you're really better off thinking about them as voltage-controlled current sources in general. I will die on that hill. Before you try arguing with me about it in the comments, watch my video titled BJTs are voltage-controlled current sources in its entirety. Okay, enough ranting. Let's do some analysis. Signal's coming in here. It hits the base. I'm going to assume that the bases of the transistors draw negligible current, so they're essentially infinite input impedances. They're not really, we'll just approximate them as such. This transistor here at the front is a PNP transistor acting as a common emitter amplifier. So the signal goes in the base and comes out of the collector. Now, when you're first presented with transistor amplifiers, they're usually drawn using NPN transistors, so this may be flipped upside down compared to the way you're used to it if you're used to looking at NPN transistor circuits. I'm going to draw a little up arrow to try to keep track of the polarity of the signal. Common emitter configurations are inverting configurations, so I'm going to draw a down arrow here. And this configuration has a lot of gain. So we're going through here, we hit another transistor. This time it's an NPN instead of a PNP, but it's also acting as a common emitter amplifier. So if the signal is going down here, we'll say it's going up here. Polarity flips. So the signal goes through here up to the output of that particular stage. So we have an up arrow going in, an up arrow coming out, so the whole structure is non-inverting. But it also branches this direction through the feedback loop through R95, this 10K resistor, and it comes down to this emitter here. So going into the emitter and coming out of the collector, this is now acting as a common base amplifier, which also has a ton of gain. But the common base configuration is non-inverting. So if we have an arrow going up here, think about an arrow going up here, there's an arrow going up here because that common base configuration is non-inverting. The important thing to note is that these arrows are going opposite directions. So this is a proper negative feedback loop. Now, technically speaking, there is another path from the input to output. If we imagine a signal here, it's going into the base. It's also kind of coming out of the emitter with this transistor acting as a common collector amplifier, also known as an emitter follower. So there's a signal going up here that's snaking through this direction backwards through the feedback path, making a little arrow go up here. Notice I said little arrow, even though I didn't draw it as such. Remember that the common emitter stages have a massive amount of gain. So there's a massive amount of gain there. And if I imagine that massive amount of gain, there's even a massive more amount of gain coming out of the second stage. So this main path through those two common emitter configurations has a ton of gain. And if we think about then its effect on the feedback here, it's completely swamping the effect of that little path snaking backwards through the feedback. So everybody ignores that little sneaky path, and we will too. Now, with a lot of hand waving, we can vaguely think about the base of this input transistor as being the positive input of an op-amp-like thing as far as the small signal goes. And we can think of the emitter as being the negative input of this op-amp-ish kind of thing, again, as far as the small signal goes. I just realized I forgot to talk about the capacitors. When you're doing this kind of general midband analysis, a good rule of thumb is to just ignore small capacitors for now. Those are things that are having high-frequency shaping characteristics. I'll come back to those later. But as far as the big capacitors go, you can think of those as shorts. I'll come back to what 86 and 90 are doing later. Right now, let me talk about I'm not even sure what that number is. This capacitor right here that's going down to these resistors that are going to ground. So the output of my op-amp-like thing here is going through a voltage divider consisting of this resistor here, R95, and one of these resistors down here going to ground. So assuming that you can approximate the gain through these two common emitter amplifiers as being lots and lots and lots, you can approximate the voltage gain as being 1 plus the feedback resistance over that resistance to ground. So your gain is going to be 1 plus 10K divided by whatever resistor you pick using this rotary switch deck. And most mic preamps are going to use some sort of similar feedback scheme because it allows you to set the gain precisely without worrying about the way different transistors might affect the gain or the way that the properties of the transistors might change with temperature. The gain stages of the Neve 1073 use a similar feedback scheme, although the individual amplifiers are different, and the overall preamp is more complicated because it has multiple stages and different degrees of padding between them. Okay, I promised I would talk about what's going on with Q28. With Q27, we have a common emitter stage where R94, I think that's a 94. Anyway, whatever this is the load resistor. Q29 is another common emitter stage, and normally you would see a load resistor up here. Essentially, this whole structure is acting as a really complicated, extremely high load resistance. So let's think about the voltage going up here. Earlier, I described it as going around the feedback loop like this. Think about this capacitor for a second. If we can treat it as a short, at the frequencies of interest, I have the signal snaking through here, comes up through here. So my up arrow here turns into an up arrow here. This transistor is acting as a common collector amplifier, aka an emitter follower. So that's going to make the voltage go up here. Now it's not going to go up quite as much as it is down here because this emitter follower isn't perfect. But essentially there's a clone of the voltage down here that's appearing up here. So there's very little current flowing through R96. So this path up through R96 is going to look like a really high resistance to Q29. This is an example of a clever trick called bootstrapping. Now, you'll also see people sometimes using a transistor up here just as a fixed current source. We would call that an active load, and adding in this bootstrapping kind of puts it on steroids. There's another instance of bootstrapping at the input involving C86. Imagine for a second that C86 wasn't there. If you think about the input impedance looking into the base of this transistor and all the associated stuff, the input impedance is going to be defined by this resistor here, and this resistor here, which you can't avoid because they're part of the biasing network. Oh, and in real life, there's also going to be some input impedance associated with the current flowing into the base. Now, putting C86 back in and treating it as a short, if I imagine the signal going up here, as we discussed earlier, Q27 is acting like a common emitter amplifier with the signal coming from the base and coming out of the emitter. C27 is acting like an emitter follower, so whatever you see at the base is being copied at the emitter. And then that's getting fed back here to the bottom of, is this R90? I'm not sure what exactly this is. This 22K resistor. Anyway, it's going up here. So there's a copy of the small signal voltage at the base appearing on the other side of this 22K resistor. So not a lot of current is flowing through that resistor. There is going to be a little bit flowing because that emitter follower, that voltage buffer effect, isn't perfect. But as far as the rest of this circuit appears, looking down into this 22K resistor, it's going to appear like a really big resistance. So if we think about the input impedance looking in from this direction, from the transformer, it's really going to be defined mostly by this 27K in series with 15K. One interesting thing to note is that before they hit the amplifier coming out of the transistor, they actually cut the gain going through this voltage divider. That's interesting. According to the DIY-RE website, the Trident A mic preamp uses a transformer with a 1 to 5.63 ratio. That's highly specific. So you'll get a voltage gain of 5.63 from the transformer itself, even before you hit that 3-transistor amplifier. So what about these small capacitors? The 1500 puff capacitor you see here between the base and the emitter will have the effect of rolling off high frequencies in this first common emitter stage. The capacitor you see here between the base and the collector of the second transistor will have the effect of rolling off the high frequencies of the second common emitter stage. But because of something called the Miller effect, the way the feedback winds up working here, that 22 puff capacitor will have a much bigger effect than you might expect just looking at that 22 value. When you see low-pass filtering effects like this in an amplifier like this, they're generally not serving a musical purpose. They're usually there to help promote stability. You can get weird phase shifts in an amplifier where the feedback winds up having this weird property where at certain high frequencies, the negative feedback turns into positive feedback and you get unwanted parasitic oscillations. So capacitors like this help deal with that. Now, I haven't talked about the DC biasing because I haven't even started to try to figure that out. And I may or may not start to try to figure that out because it's awfully complicated. To work out the DC bias points, You first open up all the caps, and then you try to figure out what's going on. And all 3 transistors and all of the remaining resistors are going to play a role. And ugh. If anyone has any particular insights about the DC biasing in this amplifier that would help make this not be incredibly painful, definitely leave a comment below.